Hello and Assalamu Alaikum. I'm Marwa Mohkim Sheikh. Welcome to Narmis. At the Alaska summit, Vladimir Putin demonstrated that he is in no rush to end the conflict in Ukraine without securing political and territorial concessions. Russia's slow but steady gains on the battlefield, coupled with Ukraine's exhausted manpower and reliance on Western lifelines, have shifted the balance in Moscow's favor. Unlike Trump, who thrives on the optics of deal-making and presenting himself as a global peacemaker, Putin's approach is deliberate. He is crafting a detailed peace plan, not a temporary ceasefire, in order to extract binding guarantees. Ukrainian neutrality, recognition of Crimea, lifting of sanctions, and institutionalized cultural rights for Russians within Ukraine. For Putin, accepting a ceasefire without these concessions would be tantamount to handing the West an opportunity to rearm Kiev and prolong the conflict on more dangerous terms. Donald Trump and European leaders see the same war through different lenses. Trump seeks to project statesmanship, shifting quickly between positions, from insisting on a ceasefire to endorsing Putin's framework, so long as he appears central to ending the war. His primary currency is optics, not strategic sequencing. Europe, however, remains deeply cautious. Leaders in Berlin, Paris, and Brussels stress that a ceasefire must precede negotiations. Without halting hostilities, they fear Putin will dictate terms from the battlefield. Yet this insistence on a ceasefire is precisely what Moscow views as a Western trap, a chance to buy time, rebuild Ukrainian defenses, and reset the military balance. This divergence between Trump's theatrical diplomacy and Europe's sequencing logic reveals cracks in the Western alliance that Putin can exploit. Europe's strategy rests on a paradox. On the one hand, it wants immediate peace to reduce refugee flows, contain economic shocks, and prevent escalation on its doorstep. On the other, by arming Ukraine and rejecting premature concessions, Europe effectively commits itself to sustaining the war if Moscow refuses a ceasefire. This gamble carries immense risks. Ukraine may hold out longer with Western weapons, but the war could metastasize into Europe itself. The Afghan war offers a cautionary precedent. Pakistan, once a rare base for anti-Soviet resistance, became hostage to extremism, militancy, and instability that spilled across its society for decades. Europe faces a similar threat: weapons proliferation, entrenched refugee crises, and radicalized movements could destabilize its political order. Prolonged conflict risks feeding precisely the forces Europe most fears. Nationalist and neo-Nazi movements, already simmering in parts of Eastern and Central Europe, thrive on insecurity, refugee flows, and disillusionment with political elites. Just as the Afghan jihad radicalized Pakistan's domestic sphere, the Ukraine war could radicalize Europe's. The consequences are far-reaching: weakened democratic institutions, heightened xenophobia, and the erosion of EU solidarity. Nationalism would not only threaten Europe internally, but also play into Russia's propaganda narrative of a decadent West collapsing under its contradictions. If Russia prevails, the strategic balance inside Europe will shift dramatically. Ukraine's collapse will force Europe's core powers to rearm at scale. Germany, with its economic weight and new defense spending commitments, would emerge as the anchor of European military capacity. For Britain, this prospect is troubling. Historically wary of German dominance on the continent, London could interpret a rearmed Germany as a latent rival, even within NATO. Ironically, a Russian victory may revive dormant geopolitical tensions inside the Western alliance, pitting German assertiveness against British caution. The EU could thus face not only external pressure from Moscow, but internal fractures driven by shifting power balances. Thus, the Ukraine war is not about NATO expansion, but Europe's internal balance of power. The real question is whether the US and UK will permit Russian oil and gas to return to Europe. Cheap energy once powered German industry, giving Berlin dominance and the prospect of independence. Washington cannot afford an autonomous Europe, while London seeks to block any continental hegemon. Germany wants energy restored for survival. France, less reliant, tolerates the cutoff to restrain Berlin. For Putin, energy trade is leverage, but land is non-negotiable. Crimea and Donbass are strategic depth, not chips to exchange. Putin's battlefield strength, Trump's performative diplomacy, and Europe's conditional strategies have created a dangerous equilibrium. Europe demands a ceasefire first, but Moscow sees it as a trap. Trump seeks headlines, not sequencing. Ukraine is exhausted, yet cannot afford defeat. The longer this contradiction persists, the greater the danger for Europe itself. Refugee crises, the rise of radical nationalism, and internal fractures over Germany's role. As Afghanistan destabilized Pakistan for decades, so too could Ukraine's war destabilize Europe, unless Western leaders find a path that addresses not only Ukraine's sovereignty, but also Europe's own survival as a coherent, democratic bloc. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, Allah Hafiz.